Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Shadowverse. So, still chugging away through the main story. We did all of Gears of Rebellion with the 4 leaders instead of 8 stories. Although, in all fairness, I would say that it really was more of a story that could have easily been told with just Isabel and Yuan. And frankly, it could have just been told with Isabel. 4 years into the release of this game, they are up to 9 chapters, so it would have been a hard sell to say have the Morningstar story just involve Orisa and tease the backstory of all the other characters for over the course of several years. But as a new player to the game, there definitely is a case to make an argument for that, so that you're just not spending a ridiculous amount of time going through the main story when really you should just be focusing on the multiplayer and learning to play the card game as it exists against actual people, which is the current meta, versus whatever pre-built decks and pre-built enemies you're going to have on the main story. So, yeah, now we're going to do Gears of Rebellion Uprising, which will be the combined story of the 4 characters, and it will probably be about 12 to 15 chapters to wrap up the story. And while the writing was better in the previous chapter than the chapters before it, by 1 or 2 points, I still think it really, at best, managed to get somewhere around the 6.5 out of 10. We're not hitting great writing still. And before I go and start this, I'm gonna pause the video, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Let's now start the story. Like, we kind of know what's gonna happen here. They're gonna start a rebellion, and they're gonna fight Baphomet, and they're going to win.
Their fate is not deserved, but wrought. The magnum opus of a quiet force, whispering of purgation.
I guess we're fighting Nerva again?
In this landscape of limitless desperation, there are those who will not reject their free will. They persist.
This intro seems to be pretty good.
They subsist.
And if you were to believe the
despite
music,
unbendable environment.
it's not gonna go very long.
Passion burning behind expressionless facades. Until one day, their hope rises, and they can give form to their rage under the banner of rebellion.
I'm not sure if you need to show just backgrounds in these images. Interesting, this background image was not used in the previous chapter, so it must have been made later.
Lies the promise of a future worth any cost.
This is a much better section than the wrap-up section at the end of each of the leaders' story. In the previous chapter, that was a very long, like, summoning the troops and encouraging the troops military-like speech that was written pretty badly, so particularly since you had to watch it 4 times. But I do still feel like, had they not had a repeated wrap-up scene at the end of the previous chapter, and they had just shown the Shadowverse logo and said to be continued after each individual character's story, that would have been more interesting. And then you could have taken the rallying the troops speech at the end of the last chapters and combined it with this, and maybe had some more time and merged some ideas, and then had a better starting point here. This isn't a terrible starting point. If anything, it gives me the fear that the whole idea of Tetra lying about there being a resurrection for the robots is just not going to be touched upon, and that this entire chapter is going to feel fairly disconnected with what was happening in the previous chapter, even though it is supposed to be a continuation of the story. It may very well be a case that there was a head writer that wrote the beginning section and the ending section of each chapter, and then they let some other writers write the middle parts, which honestly I don't really believe in collaborative writing for video games or much of anything. I kind of feel like there should be one creative head, one creative leader. If you were going to do something where you had to have other people write sections, you would give them a character, you'd give them a side story, and let them tell their own story. But even then, that feels like it isn't going to connect very well. Imagine the Animatrix, if you've ever seen that, where the Matrix, ignoring the fact that the Matrix basically stole a bunch of plots and ideas from anime shows. They say they mostly stole it from Ghost in the Shell, but there are actually other shows that they more than likely also stole ideas from. The Animatrix, they had several anime animators then make their own little short skits, and then they merged it together to be one like direct-to-DVD movie collection. None of the animation styles in the Animatrix are the same. None of the stories being told are the same. It is very disjointed and not something you really would want to have happen. And you could certainly say you kind of have the similar problem with the Matrix trilogy as it went anyways, because the first movie has one feeling and one idea, and then the second movie feels very different and tells a very different story, and then the third movie feels very different and tells a different story. So there's just no narrative through line, or maybe there's a narrative through line, but there's no tonal through line.
What is it this time?
I wouldn't approach Baphomet if I was an enforcer. We have a new background in the back.
Enforcers have been deployed near Central Tower. With your command, we could immediately.
Under whose orders? Dumb piece of scrap. Nobody calls the shots around here but me.
They are hitting on the point that Baphomet seems to never allow anybody to act without his approval or without him giving the orders first,
Yes, Lord Baphomet.
which is really questioned.
Production by 300%. When I get back, Ion had better be crawling with my robots.
Like, why would you create any kind of artificial intelligence? What's said?
Lord Baphomet, the Furies are still undergoing maintenance. If we release them now, they could.
Did I stutter? Brute force it.
Yeah, I don't know why he would program robots with AI anyways. Like, clearly he wants direct and total control, but also kind of lacks the capability of having direct and total control. This is... Wow, that audio got really quiet.
Now I'm smiling.
Like, if you think about the main control program in the Terminator series, it is kind of questionable why the Terminators themselves have their own individual way of thinking and acting. And I guess there is, perhaps because they were sending the Terminators back in time, they needed to give them their own individuality, and perhaps the T-100 robots, exoskeleton types, were just under direct control of the main computer. Because that is what I would expect would be here, and would be what Baphomet would create. He would have a master control a central hub with like a big antenna that just sends out all kinds of transmissions to
Our mission
everything.
objective is to reach the top floor of Central Tower. Belphomet's laboratory.
We
I
haven't
estimate
seen
that
the
we will have
Furies.
to deal with approximately 500 enforcers. But a greater problem is the
500
nearly
is
limitless
picking a
numbers
number out
that
of the air.
foundries around Ialon can manufacture at a moment's notice.
So, we need to take out the foundries first.
Precisely. There are 3 in total. Therefore, I propose we divide into 3 parties to strike all of them
So,
simultaneously.
Submissions here,
After they
very
have been
video
destroyed,
game-like.
we will need to
Destroy the
regroup and
foundries,
move toward Central Tower.
regroup, then attack the Central
Now,
Tower.
before we-
Which is funny that they're gonna split up,
Sorry, I
but then the
figured I'd
story
let
is
you
gonna
know before
be
you go any further.
linear.
Count Urias and I out of this plan. I don't think he's one for following orders.
Ha! She is correct. I do not need a plan to defeat Belphomet. Perhaps I will see you on the field of battle. Farewell.
And there you have it. Vampires aren't really known for their people skills, are they? Or maybe that's just Urias Forman for you.
That would be an interesting question to ask,
I have
answer.
anticipated his erratic behavior and planned accordingly. Mono, will you be going with him?
Yes, you can't leave someone like him alone for a second, you know? And despite what you may think, we actually make a pretty decent team.
So,
Please stay safe.
it'll be questionable if we find
I always
Mono
do. I'll see you soon,
as
Petra.
annoying as we found
Hopefully
her
while this
in
frame is still
a
functioning.
few points. She wasn't terrible. She's nowhere as bad as some of the previous
Our
characters
strike teams
in the
will
previous
move as
chapters,
follows.
but her
Ewan,
weird
you will
poetic
be
way of
leading a group
talking
resistance members.
didn't add anything to her as a character.
Luna, you and
It's
Luna
almost like
will
they were
move
afraid
to
to just
another
write her
group.
as a normal human.
Okay.
Hey, what about me? I want to come too.
No, we need you to stay here, Clunky.
What? Really?
Roly-Poly Mark 1, you will stay here and protect any resistance members that cannot join us. Can we rely on you?
You want me to protect them?
Affirmative.
Giving him busy work, basically.
I'll hold down the fort, so be careful out there, you two. If something happens, I'll come save you. I promise.
You too, Clunky. Be careful.
It would be interesting if this story,
We'll try our best too, okay?
if the story was that they just
And finally,
get in a fight fairly quickly with the
together
Furies and
me
get
and the first
defeated
strike team.
completely
Sounds good.
on the first fight and just
After you have taken care of
it
your
looks
respective
hopeless after
foundries,
that point.
please find your way to Central Tower as quickly as possible.
We're also gonna have to keep an eye out to see if anemia is gonna be annoying
Something happens to one of the
or
teams
just
that are
too
found.
childish sounding.
In this instance, you should seek the assistance of another team. Otherwise, we risk failure. If any of the foundries remain standing, we stand no chance against Belphomet. There is no way around this.
They really are a terrible rebellion. They've made no plans. They don't have any kind of viruses to
Anything
install
less
into the robots or the foundries. They don't have any bombs
I won't let that
planted.
happen.
I appreciate all of your support.
This is going to be a very short-lived rebellion by the looks of it.
We should expect it to be only a matter of time until he is fully aware.
Really
of
is a
our
great
plan.
example of
However, we still have a
Like,
chance.
bad
It is
writing
illogical
when
for
writing
you
a
to jump to
rebellion
this conclusion,
or
but
resistance is
I know we
you
can
have
win.
protagonist
I
characters
believe
that
in
are
this
just
team.
incredibly powerful and they win the day solely as individuals, when that's not how you should write a rebellion or resistance. It should be like a lot of teamwork, a lot of people doing a little things.
Everyone, please proceed to your designated foundry. For
Like,
this world,
for instance,
for all who live free.
in this kind of story, you could have easily given a robot secretary to Belphomet that would just always follow him around, and she could be smuggling out information to the resistance unbeknownst to him. And that small, like, passive resistance would obviously show that it is very much helpful to the rebellion, more than it would seem. And so now we're going to start seeing the way these combined chapters work, in which you're going to be given a choice of what kind of hero style you can play as. Sometimes it will only be a choice of one, sometimes it'll be a choice of many. Which, this kind of goes to show that all the chapters could be linear, and probably would be better linear.
Baphomet isn't so naive, you know. If that wasn't already clear enough.
Your concern is touching.
I did tell you that I'm fond of you.
I'm gonna just pay attention to it
Right
for a
back
while.
at ya? I imagine we won't understand each other until the moment we meet our inevitable destructions. But perhaps that's for the best.
There definitely is a point here where
Is there nothing
I've
here
put
but
so many
these
hours into
weary
this main
subdolls?
story, it's really hard to relate to it or care
Quite
about it.
possibly. But then again, who's to say what a childish genius like Baphomet keeps under his bed? He did make me, after all.
So, yeah.
Central Tower intruder sighted. Initiating immediate termination.
It would be interesting if one of these sentries turned out to be a
Surely
Resistance
you're bored of fighting these robots
member
by now,
in
aren't you?
disguise.
I mean, I can already see it written all over your face.
Then look somewhere else.
Ha ha. I'm assuming you're headed for
That's
Central
like the first
Tower.
joke he's made.
Beware of the myriad enforcers you may face thither. Their numbers alone might bore you to death.
What will you do in the meantime?
Do you actually need to ask that question? I have business with Baphomet, and just maybe, coincidentally, it's the same kind of business you have with him.
Do as you like. It makes no difference to me.
So we
Of course,
have a
I don't need
potential
your
here
permission. Alas, there's no time
where
to explain my plan, as you see.
Mono gets killed and Urias actually cares
Get
about
back.
her being killed and destroyed.
Central Tower intruder sighted. Foregoing warning. Initiating immediate termination protocol.
Yeah. All these sentries
It
saying
appears
basically
these
the
dolls
same
would like to
thing.
dance. Perhaps you would like to be its partner?
You could definitely have saved
No,
yourself some
you go
voice
right
acting
ahead.
by just having him
Like the
attack
gentleman
directly.
You are, Escortius.
Like, half of these
Please
stories,
stop calling me that dreadful name any time now.
you know, you could have had half of the enemies in the previous chapters just attack people on sight
Not
and
good enough.
not talk at all
But
for
at
as little as
least
they say,
provided
what they
more of a
actually say.
challenge this time.
It's probable.
Hmm.
Baphomet likes to tweak his creations over time. We might find ourselves in actual danger before long.
Like,
One would
there
hope.
is certainly
My
a
thirst is not yet quenched.
interesting
I will
comparison to what an RPG
Stronger
would do,
opponents. Oh, that's
where
trouble with you.
you would run
So
across
predictable,
something like a wolf
but
or
you're
a
in luck.
slime or something in an RPG,
Why do you
and
say
you would
that?
just get a
I'm
monstrous
picking up
kind of
three very
sound effect,
massive, very hostile
something
units,
to
much
just
more powerful than the
indicate
ones we've faced so far.
that you're about to get into a fight, and
It's rare for her to become distracted.
that
Disturbances might
that
be
is a sound effect that would be less annoying than actual dialogue.
Central Tower intruder sighted. Initiating
And
immediate termination
yeah, I could
protocol.
see telling these same stories as kind of an RPG where you were walking around an overworld
Well, I don't
and
think
you
it's
were
wise to leave them
bumping
alone.
into random
I'm sure they're
encounters
integral to
that
the
then
Foundry's
turned
defense
into
system.
card games.
Wait, I recognize this signal.
Although I don't think free open world movement is
You'll
necessary.
have to excuse me, Urias.
I think it
It's
would
sad,
be.
But this could be our final goodbye.
It would probably be better if it looked more like a Dungeons and Dragons board
I hope
or
I
a
see you during the
board
final
game of
conflict
sort
while I'm
where
still in
pawns are
Port
just moved
Fare thee well,
forward
and a noble fight
to the next
you,
step.
Sir Urias Escortius, the unsympathetic.
Even in parting, you insist on such drivel.
I don't know what she just did there. I
Vampires
guess
live
she
forever, correct?
rocketed herself off into the screen.
I guess that's one reason I've taken such a deep interest in you.
How foolish. Perhaps because you are a machine, you do
Yeah.
not understand the true
Effectively, the
value of
overworld
life.
is a board game.
Oh, I do.
It just doesn't have
It's
any
not
little
like I want to decline any
dashes
scrap,
connecting
but
the
if it's what
spots,
must be done,
which
if it will protect my sister's
I would have definitely
resistance,
put dashes there to make it
it's
look,
not for them.
make it more obvious that
Well, it
this
is,
was a long
but most
travel,
importantly,
long
I'll do
path.
it for myself.
And here we have a
I'll make my
flashback from the
own
previous
purpose in this
chapter.
world, and that's all
which-
there is to it.
Okay, I don't know if we actually
I do not
need all
have
of
the
that.
patience to be worried over such things.
Really is questionable, I guess, how much of a delay there was between the previous chapter and this chapter when it originally came out.
But
If they were out
perhaps
on the
it is
same
precisely
day,
why
you don't need the flashbacks. If they were out 6 months apart, you might need the flashbacks. But then, for anybody late to the party like me,
forget.
you don't need the flashbacks again.
First, I will take pleasure in this dance.
Yeah, here, when you see these little dots, if there was just a little dot between... Can I do this? Yeah, if there was a little dash dot here, just glowing little footsteps from here to this point, that would be great. So that it shows that there's been some traveling. They are effectively jumping around quite a lot in these chapters, whereas you might think about going the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings direction and showing that it actually is a challenge to get around the city, but apparently not. And since this is Hell Hath No Furies, which I think is a mistranslation from Hell Hath No Fury, like a woman scorned, I assume we're gonna fight the Furies and Urias is going to be defeated by them early on. But you kind of need that to happen, because otherwise Baphomet doesn't become the final boss.
Isabel, are you injured?
You could certainly have the story where they fight Baphomet, defeat him, and then the Furies show up and attack in their way stronger.
We might be overtaken at this rate.
Affirmative.
You could even have a twist where the Furies were controlling Tetra and the other sisters to have them defeat Baphomet, so then the Furies could take over.
Their firepower seems to have increased as well.
Baphomet's doing.
Affirmative.
I'm not sure I
But do not worry,
fully
Isabel.
agree with the story starting on Urias either, but getting him out of the way is probably a smart move.
Everyone, bust through them!
It looks like these robots are just smashing into
Will
them,
continue as planned.
because apparently they never animated any attack for the robots.
As am I. We will soon arrive at the foundry. We must. Isabel, be careful. I sense something. Something massive is coming our way.
Weird tapping sound effect in the background.
Arriving in 3, 2. Wait. I recognize this signal.
Target acquired. Switching system to battle mode. Activating wave cannon Aurelii.
So it'd be funny if this is
Thing.
J3
I did
or
not predict this.
J2 or
No, this can't be happening. Ania, what's wrong? They're coming. My sisters are coming.
Target acquired.
so if the Furies are supposed to be sisters like Tetra and the others,
Switching to battle mode.
then
Activating particle maze.
then why do they look like they're just
What's going on?
super versions of the Sentries?
Why have you come here?
Everyone fall back now!
Target acquired.
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense that the other series of
Switching to battle mode.
characters
Activating quantum
are
grid now.
completely not humanoid in
Of course, it would make
appearance.
it so easy for us.
I would expect nothing less from you, Baphomet.
This is kind of ideal, though.
Mind and cruel with your toys. You truly are a child.
Like,
You've even resorted to activating my dear sisters. Imagine waking to this nightmare, a scene beyond time and death.
I am Megara the Indignant. Ye who would trespass on forbidden ground, behold true fury and meet thy destruction.
so yeah, giant
I am
sentry.
the dissonant. Ye who would trespass on forbidden ground, hear the cacophony and meet thy destruction.
Now, I haven't seen any cards
I anticipate
of characters that look like this.
ye who would trespass
And you'd think there would be cards in the
step
card
forward
game
and meet thy destruction.
around these characters.
Souls get in the way of progress, make you weaker. They're meaningless and you don't need them. My furies are proof of that. Now, dance with them, ladies. Show them
It's
the
weird to have a
beauty of
cutaway
anger,
and see him
defiance, and
talk.
vengeance. Destroy them!
Like, because he's not like talking through a transmission or a video chat or anything, as far as we can tell. The camera just like turned its attention to him in his top of his tower, and I guess the indication here is he is somehow directly communicating with the Furies. It's real hard to kind of care about Tetra and the rebellious sisters fighting their sisters in the form of the Furies, when the Furies don't look like they're human at all, and there's really not a lot of reason to relate to them. Inherently, the story in the previous chapter should have been that Baphomet has captured 3 of their other sisters
Tetra,
and
this is another
turned
one
them
of
into
Baphomet's
monsters.
creations, isn't it? Affirmative. However, it is not an ordinary machine. This one is...
Hit confirmed. Adapting battle protocol. Charging wave cannon.
Get back, Isabel!
Charge complete. Wave cannon Aurelii, stand by. Fire.
There is probably a tactical mistake in having
Direct hit confirmed.
3 super powerful Furies fighting
Are
in
you okay?
small areas.
Affirmative. However,
They,
I am
there's a
not
lot of room
confident
for
I can
friendly
withstand
fire.
A second blast.
Wave cannon Aurelii overheating. Applying coolants. Loading battle pattern B and proceeding with termination protocol.
It doesn't feel like there's gonna be any communication here,
Charging Delta
that
cannon.
they can
Fire.
talk to the Furies or turn them over to their side.
Light damage sustained.
Her armor is too strong. Then let's try this.
And if Isabel was a real alchemist, she could probably just turn all the metal into liquid. But
She definitely puts up.
she's kind of indicated as being an alchemist, but we haven't really seen her do
Affirmative.
anything I'd
She is
call
completely
alchemy.
different from other robots. She is like me. What? She is a creation akin to a younger sister. Younger sister? What do you mean? Judging from her signal, she was produced between Ania and myself, from the remnants of Penta, of Hexa.
Cooling systems
I don't
activated.
think it helps anything for them to throw in some new names of Penta, of Hexa.
My sisters, they were used to build this monster.
So he merged
That's
two
horrible.
other
They no longer possess their
unshown
original
characters.
forms. Baphomet must have known I would detect them. A twisted attempt to break my spirit.
Deactivating cooling systems. Radiant wave cannon Aurelii. 5, 4, 3, 2. Charge complete. Wave cannon Aurelii, stand by.
A lot of Japanese, like, let's give a name to the wave cannon, let's give a name to the attack. A lot of Sentai style ideas. And I guess they just kneeled down to avoid it.
Isabel,
And then they have her.
what did you do?
I shifted the gravity around her just as she fired. Looks like it was enough to affect her aim. Learned that trick from a friend, but I'm
She
surprised
was
I pulled
squinting
it off.
her eye. Once again, and the weird
I knew I
animation
was
that they
right
would
to choose you.
bother to have that be an
I'm
option.
flattered, but there's no saying whether I'll be able to do it a second time.
The wink
What's the
or
plan?
squint.
Well, Megara's greatest weapon is the wave cannon Iralii. That and her impenetrable armor.
This feels
All
pretty
four
boring.
outclass us in both offensive and
Like,
defensive terms.
This would be a heavy action, very interesting event if this were an action game where you were actually
There
fighting
is
them,
hope, however,
or if
as
you
she
were
has
playing an
one weak
RPG
point.
and doing
Isabel,
like
would you be able to
turn-based
restrain her for at least 1 second?
tactical attacks, that would
Just
make
for a second?
sense.
I think so.
But since this is a collectible card game,
First, we will
they're
damage
just
the
kind
wave
of
cannon.
showing us
Then,
action
when she
instead of
prepares to fire
allowing
in
us to
counterattack,
interact with the
suppress her
action.
movement.
And that's
And then you'll take care of the rest, right?
off-putting to say the
Got it.
least.
Affirmative. Penta, Hexa. Please bear with
Which-
it a little longer. I will free you soon.
I kind of do wonder, at a certain point, instead of having us play actual card games, if they gave us just puzzles in between these where they gave you 3 cards and you just picked the card that was the correct one to win in one turn, might be more interesting. But even that would just slow down the whole process. There is just this dissonance,
It worked.
as it were, just disconnect between the main story and what's going on in the main story in the card game.
Increasing power output of wave cannon Iralii. Disengaging safeguards.
Tetra, I'm preparing the
Which
spell.
inherently
I'm ready when
that
you are,
is
Isabel.
more of a argument for skipping the battles like we are doing here, just to save yourself time. And when I go back and play the battles, I'll skip the dialogue and have completely forgotten what was going on.
Delta cannon, fire.
Stand by. Fire.
Arguably, this is probably a good reason why the anime that they eventually made isn't just telling this story also, because if I was just watching this and it was way more animated and it was just a standard anime to advertise Shadowverse, I think I'd be fairly disappointed after an episode to
Right before she fired, I
to
used the Delta
then
cannon to
go and
destroy
try and play the
Iralii's
card
barrel
game and
emergency
have it
safeguards.
seem nothing like the
As a result,
show.
the energy had nowhere to go except inward,
Hmm.
causing it to implode upon itself.
Wow, Tetra. That shot was 1 in a million.
It would not have been possible without your aid, and for that, I thank you.
So assumedly she
Sure
just
you're
killed
okay, though?
2 of her
I know
sisters.
we didn't have any other choice, but your sisters.
I am deeply saddened. However, I will not let this sadness go to waste. It will become my strength, as long as I have you and everyone else to support me.
I'm glad they didn't
I won't
use
let
that
you down.
phrase again, where like turn
Let us
turn
proceed,
your sadness to
Isabel.
anger, turn your
Central
anger to
Tower
hate, turn
still
your
stands.
hate to
Our
power,
real
or
battle
whatever
awaits.
the saying was. So why at that point did they not also have to fight the other 2 Furies? Did the game show it to me in a weird way in this chapter, where it revealed the 4 Furies, but the 4 Furies were in the 3 Furies were in 3 different places? I guess I kind of have to assume that that is the case, but they definitely did not make that clear. Now, in all fairness, I'm not paying a lot of attention to the story, but yeah, the background's not changing, and that's, they should like palette swap the background or flip the background or have the different backgrounds.
I said just stop it!
We're almost at the factory.
And so you kind of have to assume that this robot is going to be weaker if Luna and Anemia is going to be able to defeat her, which we assume they will.
I know the signal. It's me, Ania. I'm your sister. I know we've never met, but I can feel it. You're still there, aren't you?
Ania is supposed to be the most powerful
But she isn't
of
anything
them,
like your other sisters.
where she can create other robots.
This can only mean Baphomet did this. Only he could have done something so mean to my sister.
But I don't know what
What a monster!
she could actually do.
It's so cruel.
I don't really follow the logic here. It's really hard to relate to say, oh, he did something so cruel as he built a robot like all the other robots that have been built. Like, this hardly looks like he ripped a humanoid robot apart and used its
What's happening?
pieces to make some monstrosity.
Damaged unit mainframes. Authorization complete. Manually overriding system data with cottage protocol and forcing
Here, another name of an attack. She's hacking the people. Did he just turn all the robots into...
What? They're getting back up. That's impossible.
Oh, she's not hacking these guys. She's bringing the other sentries back up in.
All units, fire.
Like, I know this card game is supposed to be somewhat family
How are they
friendly,
still moving? They should have
but
been
and
destroyed.
kid friendly. But if they really wanted it
Because of that staff.
to be
You're being controlled.
to look cruel, like Baphomet really did something cruel, there should be a humanoid like head hanging from the belt of the Fury, or like a humanoid arm on one side with a robotic arm on the other. There should be something a little bit gory, a little bit grotesque,
Cry, Ania. If you start,
something that a human
it'll
could
make me cry too.
really relate to.
Current battle pattern confirmed.
So yeah, if there were a couple of heads hanging on the belts, for as much as this game loves fancy belts, that would make
She can do
sense.
all this because of that staff, huh? Then I'll just have to
Like
break it
robotic
myself.
heads,
So don't
like
cry,
a whole
okay?
belt of robotic heads of their kills.
You'd better not hurt me.
A
You'll just
very
make my
magical
father
girl
angrier.
there with that sound effect.
Take that!
Or they could say they sense their sister's pain and their sense her soul being trapped in the robots and it's in pain. That would be a decent line of dialogue to have.
Adapting battle protocol.
But,
Increasing
yeah.
mass flux rate.
As it's depicted, it just looks like a robot, like all the other robots.
Energy output to all units increased by 300%. Initiating attack.
And it's asking too much to really expect to see Luna or Anima do much here. I assume they're gonna win, but I don't think they're gonna win the whole day.
Activating detonation protocol.
The suicide bombing aspect is coming back into the story.
Are you okay?
Maybe we'll have Roly Poly Mark II show up.
Calculating stress on particle maze cottage. Complete. Increasing all remaining unit performance by 500%.
And them throwing out numbers saying, oh, it's increased by 500%. Doesn't really mean anything because the animations look pretty much the same.
All units.
The audio won't get too loud.
Is that?
It's fairly cliched.
Protect you if things got bad. Right?
Although, not terrible because they have been fairly unwilling to kill off any characters up until this point. Except for like assassins in the previous section where they killed themselves.
It's
And even then they were bending over backwards to stop the assassins.
I'll make a funny face. So let's see that.
So, yeah, this is definitely an instance of them growing up a little bit in their level of the storytelling they're willing to tell.
Particle mace cotage. Metaflux limit reached.
Which they kind of need to, because Luna's whole story is really about dealing with her dead parents.
He wouldn't break. You're my sister. How could you?
5, 4, 3.
Clunky. He was always there for us. Roly Poly Mark 1. He was our...
2, 1.
I feel like at some point
Activating particle mace cotage.
they should have forced her to had anemia calling him Clunky too.
Targets increasing power levels confirmed. Spectral bodies increasing power levels confirmed. Damage levels critical.
You're horrible. He'll never forgive you. You're not my sister. You're just a bully. Mother, father. She did something terrible to my friend. Get her.
Better voice acting here.
Why? Why would she do that to our friend? How could you? Clunky was special to us.
Unfortunately, Luna's story, while it was fine in the previous chapter, it wasn't a main focus. And so,
You're not running away.
like,
Forge.
we should have potentially paid more attention around Roly Poly Mark 1 and Anemia if we were going to be
How sad that is.
more
You
concerned about this, like, and would relate to this more.
Damage sustained.
Well, and you could have just had Roly Poly Mark 1 show up in all 4 of the leader's story, and then particularly if you were planning on killing him, because yeah, there's just not enough familiarity there.
Did we do it? It looks like it. But Luna, Roly Poly Mark 1. I know. Poor
Of course, they also named a Mark 1, which just assumes that they'll make a Mark 2.
He's not gonna wake up, is he? No, he's gone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And so now are we just going to have a cry session?
If only
Because
had
I could
done
only put up
more.
with that for about 5 minutes.
It's okay, Anya. Just hug me real tight, okay? Luna. I know. I'm sad too.
It would be fairly pointless if
It's okay
they
to cry, Anya.
found some magical way to bring him back to life.
But I have to stay
Because they need to
strong.
use that as a motivation,
So,
in part, to move them against Baphomet.
you should cry enough for both of us. Let it all out.
Very Japanese way of
It's okay.
of
It's okay.
writing the crying
You're
sound,
not alone, Anya. I'm here for you.
where you would
okay?
have probably been better just
After
putting
we've had a
crying
chance to rest a
in
bit,
parentheses.
let's go meet up with everyone else. We're all here for you, okay?
Yep. In all fairness, had they killed Urias instead of Roly Poly Mark 1, I think there'd be less people actually crying for him. But yeah, they definitely should have had him as more of a character in the previous chapter, with interacting with the other leaders, so you never really forgot about him, and everybody kind of learned to love him, and the player learned to love him. Because honestly, it's been probably 3 hours since I did Luna's story in the previous chapter, so I barely even remember him.
So he's decided to play his hand.
And since they're all defeating the Furies, then unless he has other Furies other than 3,
We'll show you the power of the resistance.
it's going to be a very linear experience here, where they're going to defeat the 3 Furies, and then they're going to go fight Baphomet to defeat him, and maybe there's a Nerva vessel, or Nerva herself will show up. It might be worth it for Nerva to actually show up in this story. That way she doesn't just become this teased enemy.
Charging complete. Activating Quantum Blade Nylon.
And this Quantum Blade attack apparently is effective against Yuan and robots.
Recalibrating attack protocol. My blade cut first thy wings.
Way too poetic.
She broke through, but how?
Fell second thy legs. Hunt third thy arms. Gouge forth thy eyes.
This is weird
She's too quick.
dialogue.
Sunder fifth thy neck.
It's just all kinds of blades on several different
Pierce
attachments.
sixth thy heart. Sheathing Quantum Blade Nylon. Switching to termination protocol. Pattern D until recharge completed.
So, is Yuan gonna get killed? That wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Get back!
Ewan, when robots are destroyed, where do they end up? I hear humans go to heaven.
Termination protocol D.
So,
Confirmed effective.
J3 dying is gonna feel
Get
repetitive,
out of here. She'll rip you apart.
but it seems like that's what they're gonna do.
I bet no one went there.
Yes. J2 and Io are waiting for you there. You'll be a family again.
And inherently, this is the same lie that Tetra confessed to in the previous chapter. I'm not sure I agree with the degrading sound effect, but since this is a visual novel, you can read along.
Termination protocol D confirmed.
That was oddly written. Ha.
You should all be back at the hideout.
Anita's guardian, Roly-Poly Mark I, left the base to defend her. We decided we had to do the same.
Of course, none of us want to be reduced to scrap. But it's better than doing nothing.
If you're out
They
here
should have
acting
come
on
in
your
and
own
attacked
free will
anyways,
to
because
protect yourselves and
Baphomet
everything you know.
was going to hunt him
Well,
down and kill them all
That's good enough
if
for
the
me.
rebellion failed. So they might as well have just all died fighting, if at all
Watch out for her
movable.
sword. It cuts through any defense, and she's too fast to avoid. Direct assault won't work either. Her armor's too thick for that.
Then what are we supposed to do?
There is one way, but it might cost me my life.
Yeah,
Join up with the others
at
somewhere
a certain
safe for now.
point, if they move too fast and they can cut through any defense,
Be careful out there.
then you have to go with the old, I'm gonna let it stab me in the gut so it gets close to me, and then I'm gonna suicide myself and blow up.
Coming from a servant. I'll break you before you have the chance. You may have cut down my allies, but I'll see their will be done. You're not going to stop us.
So the fight didn't end in that section.
Not going to
Instead, we
pull
had a
out your
card
sword?
game battle.
Charging complete. Activating Quantum Blade Nylon.
Here she comes.
My blade
There is
cut first thy wings,
clearly a rhythm to her attack,
fell second thy legs,
and
and third thy arms, gouge forth thy eyes.
they seem to repeat things.
Her attacks are incredibly quick, but she only launches one at a time. Just have to predict the trajectory of each.
Sunder fifth thy neck,
Evade them,
pierce sixth thy.
and hit her with everything I've got!
So yeah,
Critical.
It's true your blade is powerful.
once
enough to
again
make
we're
short
having
work of
an
my
action
shields.
sequence trying to be told to us instead of really being shown to us or letting us interact
Hollow
with it.
shell like you could never use one to its full potential.
Damage critical. Stand by for system restart in 3, 2.
You'd think
Through.
Tetra would be fighting
System overload.
with him.
500 seconds until system shutdown. Initiating
Which-
termination protocol.
I guess not. You know, it'd be fairly easy for these robots to lie and say, like, initiating termination protocol and distract them while they're talking and then attack
I won't last much longer.
differently.
Initiating
Like,
termination
it'd be
protocol.
fairly easy for her to say depowering blades or recharging blades and then immediately start attacking with the
You don't
blades.
seem very familiar with the Furies, but I assure you, I can explain quite well.
Mono, you've come.
Seems
They are our
an
younger
odd
sisters based on our
color
designs,
matching.
but remodeled for Belphamet's twisted delight. It feels strange being hit by your own power.
You're badly damaged. You shouldn't have shielded me.
What can I say? I have a protective streak. And besides, this battlefield is where I have deigned to die. Now come, Ewan, we've got work to do.
Mono,
So,
stop
yeah.
this.
Story's
to
been
say,
going
you
for a
wouldn't
while
work
now.
without me, though.
Let's see.
This unit is the paragon
50
of the
minutes, I would
Furies,
say.
But you were able to get a clean hit on her. Impressive.
Initiating
I
termination
feel like
protocol.
there's still at least 3 chapters.
Impressive enough
After
that I
this
felt
chapter.
compelled to action. This foundry shall fall by our hands, lest my brothers and sisters
And
earn
we're
not
gonna
their
run
freedom.
into Mono
And you
potentially,
sparked this change,
just
Ewan.
adding a ton of
Words are
dialogue,
important to lose now.
a ton of poetic
Don't you die on me.
haiku, maybe.
No promises
Dialogue.
there, sir. Well, dearest sisters, it's been quite some time since I've seen you. Although I imagine you don't remember who I am at all.
I don't think it adds anything to the story if
Initiating termination protocol.
if they did get to Belphamet and they
Seems
just
you're
like
doing well enough.
did one attack
Isn't how I
and
imagined our
killed
reunion
him
would
or
go,
he ran away.
defending against the same
um,
energy that powers me.
Like that would speed up the story a little bit, but it wouldn't give a satisfactory
Plus,
ending.
manipulating cannon, Ania's hacking system, and on top of it all, my ability to forcefully increase frame performance despite the number of critical errors it might produce. Truly frightful stuff in the hands of an enemy.
Frame performance.
A little Tisiphone.
Almost
Your version of
seems like that's a
program
reference to this game.
too crude.
Alright, I will be
Just kidding. It's downright incomplete.
congratulatory to the game that I have
Shouldn't be too
not
robots with
seen
my power.
any
Nope.
lockups of the text scrolling on screen. We were seeing that in earlier chapters,
Disengaging
and they
safeguards.
must have fixed that, although they didn't go and fix it in the previous
We've
chapters.
both broken our limits. That's what we were designed for, after all. So we'll spend our last moments. Oh, what would that vampire say? Dancing the dance of life and death until we're both scrap. Don't you worry, my little sisters. I won't abandon the Furies. I'll join you all in death and love.
Yeah, she's annoying. Like, I really wish we could get a chapter where we aren't forced into having 3 or 4 annoying conversations from at least one annoying character. Like, you don't have to write an annoying character in a story. It's not a requirement. And this last chapter is called Alpha and Omega, and we're gonna get some cards based off of those Fury characters, and then still feel like there's probably 3 chapters after this. We didn't see Mono actually defeat her, so it feels like this is the 3rd chapter in which we've had just action on action on action.
Increasing mana flux drive to maximum output. Still haven't given up, have you? I'm actually a little impressed, but I suppose you figured it out too. This is a fight to the bitter end. My blade, cut first thy wings.
So this might have been a good point to have Mono just swoop in and get stabbed in the stomach and then blow up and take out Tisiphone. Like, just a quick sacrifice to defeat the Fury. Because then you could eliminate 2 kind of annoying characters that are talking nonsense, basically. There is also a point to mention here that they mentioned mana, but they never did anything with any of that. The whole mana crystals and all of that seem to not matter. Which, honestly, the concept of mana should be introduced to all of the heroes, and they should seek out mana in all future worlds as a power source to improve, or as a power source to jump to different worlds.
No need to rush things. This is my final dance, so I'd like to savor the moment.
It would be interesting if Nicola Adele showed up.
Penta, Hexa, Hepta, Octo, and of course, Tetra, Ania. I am the first of our lineage, the bearer of the Alpha Drive. Prepare yourself, dear sister, to return back to where it all began.
Yep, just another fight, and fairly boring. Like, I really don't have anything to say. The listing of each of the sisters could have been a hint in a bigger story that there are going to be more Furies, but I don't know if I believe that. Urias is going to swoop in and save the day. Which I guess is a small character growth moment for Urias. To save
Surely
Mono.
That wasn't an opponent worthy of your final battle, was it?
Sorry, but that just happened to be my sister, I'll have you know. She was heavily modified, but still.
Oh?
May I ask you this, Urias Formand? Why is it that you are here? Not the top floor where Baphomet awaits, but here.
Over the span of my years, I have long sought the ultimate battle. Yet you, with your limited lifespan, have gone out of your way to avoid conflict. So to answer your question, I merely wished to see how your story would end.
Is that so? Hey, I guess I shouldn't be so surprised.
That being said,
Interesting.
I hope you're not planning on
You picked her
perishing
up.
now.
That was the plan. I'm quite exhausted, actually. You must be tired of hearing it by now, but I am rather feeble, remember?
Don't be ridiculous. Were you hoping to die among a pile of dolls? Surely one such as yourself would prefer a bed of flowers over this.
Ha! I don't need anything fancy like that. If this should be my final resting place, then I shan't present complaint.
But have you truly pushed yourself?
This
to
would
the
be such a
absolute
better
breaking
experience if
point?
she would just talk normally.
I mean, look at me.
And
My systems are already going haywire.
like,
I could even take another step.
it wouldn't be
Yet it
true
seems you can
translation
still move, and
if
remain
the
cognizant.
localizing team made the
Your
argument
dance isn't
to
over
have her
just
talk
yet.
normally.
Let's go.
But I think that conversation should have
Oh,
definitely
mercy.
happened
You're
and
a
gone the
real
other way.
taskmaster, you know that? Honestly,
Like,
I can't figure out what's going on inside that head of yours sometimes.
because
But then again, I
they are
suppose that's what makes you so
actively making
entertaining.
it difficult to pay attention and relate to Mono by having her talk in such a weird, poetic, flowery language that probably makes a lot of sense in Japanese. It probably is that she's just speaking in haikus, and possibly if it is that she's speaking in haikus in Japanese, even then that would make her less understandable and less relatable, and it just doesn't add anything. So we've got one Tisiphone, one Electo, and one Magnaria, although I'm not sure if these are emblems, or if these are cards, or if these are special animated versions of cards, because they don't really tell you, and right-clicking and left-clicking on these don't really tell you what you actually just received. Yeah, you run into this problem now where you should be hyped
So
for
this is
this
Central
final
Tower.
section, this final act. You should
Affirmative.
be upset with
I hope the
Belphomet
others made it.
a lot more than I really am,
It appears they
and
have.
you should
My
really want to see
the
him
enemy's signals have gone
be
cold.
defeated,
The operation is proceeding
and
just
instead
as
I
planned.
just want to
Good to
be
know.
over with it.
Still,
And a ton of that is the first few chapters, like everything up to like chapter 5. Just
I don't think we can let our
it's
guard down
long
just yet.
and it's boring,
Correct.
and the story writing
Even if we
has
have
been
managed to
improved
destroy the
in the
foundries,
Rebellion
there is no
story
guarantee that our
here, but
firepower
it's still
equates to
not
Belphonet's.
so great that it justifies people maintaining interest and continuing down this path.
In any case, we need to start heading up.
It really is just not the forte of a collectible card game team
Nothing. We may proceed.
to have them write a main story,
All right.
and particularly such a long
Something's
main
here.
story.
Hostile life form detected.
And in all fairness, I assume that there's kind of a massive amount of visual novels out there that aren't that good. And typically, if they're not written well, they also
Watch out,
don't
Tetra.
look visually very nice. So I assume is
Need some
fairly
help.
obvious in those cases.
Luna. Ania. Thank
But-
goodness.
Yeah,
I was monitoring your signal, but never mind.
that
I am
this
relieved to
main
see
story
you
really
safe.
makes a great argument as to why there is no main story like this in Magic the Gathering Arena or Hearthstone.
Stay strong.
I feel like every
Good girl,
expansion
Ania. Your
could
presence
potentially
alone is
have
enough to augment
a
my power.
15 to 30 minute just animated episode
It looks like you didn't have any
that
trouble
is
getting here.
kind
Either
of
way,
its
glad
own
you
little
made it.
side story that doesn't really
I'm just glad
say
everyone's
anything or
here
do
in one
anything,
piece, even if we're all a little worse for wear.
but that's about as much as I think you
No
could do
kidding. It's only a
instead
matter
of
time until the
an
rest of my mana is
hour
exhausted.
plus
And it seems everyone else
of
isn't
main
holding out
story.
much better.
Yes. Well,
There is something to be said about when video games sell novellas and books based on the movie effectively. That becomes then a product for such a niche audience of
Should we go?
book readers that
yes.
it doesn't ever
Let's
get
end this
into the
once and for
general
all.
mindset of a video game player. I'm sure
Stay
it's
sharp,
like the
everyone.
soundtracks that are for sale for most games. It's like you have to be a fan of video game soundtracks to want to spend the extra money or the extra time to own and listen to those soundtracks, and they are very separate.
Save your strength for Belphomet. I'll stay and buy you some time.
There could
You're
be
clearly injured. You shouldn't try to fight them by
more
yourself.
backstory in the form of just written books, kind of like the Skyrim books.
We need you to face
But
Baphomet.
even that, in that instance, I didn't read any of the books in Skyrim because I wanted to play an interactive experience. I didn't want to read a book. Here, I'm being forced to read a book, or at least listen to a book on tape. And this probably is a great argument for me that I should not listen to books on tape.
Let fury consume you, and your opponent prevails.
Didn't expect to see you here.
So we're having the triumphant reunification,
You should already know why
which I guess that means the other 4 leaders of the team are not gonna come back together.
To reunite with you all, but it seems that this brute of a vampire had other plans for me.
Mono.
Once again, just a great point to mention that Tetra's outfit just makes no sense at all. I mean, look at Mono's flowing, like, dress and fabric outfit. Like, no other character we've seen in any other chapter has had a latex bodysuit as an outfit. And I guess they could have had her covered in bronze armor if they were thinking kind of in that direction.
We will hold this area. Please make your way to Baphomet.
If they had given her a bronze armor chest piece and a non-bikini armor bottom piece, that might make some sense.
Be careful. We're all friends now, so you're not allowed to get destroyed.
Also, Tetra is the middle sister, so it then again makes no sense that she's wearing such a different outfit compared to the other 2 sisters.
I'll be waiting for you at the top.
And once again, too many people on the screen at a time.
Promise.
Like, yeah, she's wearing a fabric outfit. She's wearing a fabric outfit. She's wearing a latex bodysuit, cat suit.
I can barely stand as it is.
There is no plan. From here on, we simply follow our instincts.
What a terrible plan.
Excellent. I expect nothing less from my brilliant sisters. A most fitting solution, I do say.
And at a certain point,
Tetra.
this scene makes an argument that the other leaders didn't need to exist at all. Like, they're not really adding much. Perhaps one of the ideas I've thrown out there is, like, when they travel to new worlds, perhaps they end up inside the minds of other characters. It would have been a interesting twist on a storytelling device to have Urias the vampire inside the mind of Mono, observing things and having, like, direct communication with Mono, and then you would put, like, Isabel or Yuan or both in Tetra, and then you would put Luna in Aminia's head, and then you solve a problem of having just a ton of people on the screen a lot of times, and then that makes these 3 heroes, who are really the heroes of this story, more of a focus, instead of the overarching heroes of the entirety of the story having to come in and play a role. I guess because you only have those 4 heroes, you can only, even in this final battle, play as these 4 types of challenges, which kind of stinks because you would want it to kind of unlock and let you play with any deck you want to choose later on after you've beaten it once.
We haven't even gotten started yet. Besides, I don't believe I've given you
They
permission to decide anything.
really failed to make Baphomet
Toying with the lives and emotions of
a
others.
bad
I'll
guy
never
that
forgive you for what you've
is
done.
imposing or much of a character at all.
Judge, jury, and executioner. You don't make half the god I do. I simply do what I want. Tell me you don't live by the same principle.
I still feel like
After
he has
all,
like the
you
power
smashed
of a
tons
keeper of
my
whim.
robots. What if they'd
Or
come
something
to
like
life
that.
with their own free wills? Oops, looks like somebody's been playing with lives they shouldn't have.
That's impossible. I've seen how you built them. Your latest models won't awaken no matter what.
How perceptive. Doesn't change the fact that you destroyed them. Maybe we have more in common than I thought. Should we join forces?
Sorry, but I'll have to pass.
I bet you already belong to a group. Well, it makes sense. Imagine if weak fish didn't school together. Whole species would be eaten within a week. Same reason
Baphomet hasn't had a lot of dialogue, so
Then we'll defeat you
this is
while you're
very
alone.
late in the game to give him a character developing story
Yeah, we
or
hate
speech.
Look at yourselves. Look at your insolence. I've had enough of this crap.
And then they threw in a
I just
cuss
want you all
word,
to remember that while you're
which
crying out in pure
this is like the second or
unadulterated
third time they've done that,
agony, this misery upon yourselves.
which I don't think
Hope you've got
really
no
matters.
None at all.
But there definitely are points in the story where it feels a
Citra
little
and I have been through so
watered
much,
down for
but
kids,
we're finally moving on. We've
kind of
made it so
pointlessly.
far. And you're the source of their grief. Their
At
suffering.
a certain level,
But no more.
any free-to-play
Your reign
game
ends here.
really isn't appropriate for kids, because it literally is manipulating the undeveloped parts of a child's brain to make them basically gamble, if not directly gamble, to open packs. So yeah, I would not
Now,
suggest to any kid to let them play any free-to-play game. And if I was going to do that, I would have to be a very rich person that just gives them an account that has everything
looking
by
scornfully down
default.
on the people below.
That way they are not engaged in the pack opening
Fulfilling only
aspect
your
at
own
all.
whims.
Just tell them you don't need to do that. You already have all the cards.
You make me
And that
sound
would be a
unique.
very expensive
I got some
thing to do,
tough
certainly.
news for you, though. We're all
It's the
brought
actual
into this world
act,
alone,
the animations
and
of
that's
opening the
how
packs that's
we'll leave it.
just as objectionable as using
I'm not
money
alone at
to
all.
open packs or loot boxes.
I can't believe
In the same way, I wouldn't suggest kids playing a fake slot machine that gives candy or doesn't give out any reward
She's
compared
right.
to a
None of us
real
are alone
slot
any
machine.
longer. We have allies.
Citra, you've come.
My heart told me I must. When I thought of the safety of my companions, the fear controlling me seemed to
It
fade
is a
away.
little interesting that they flash back to
God,
the
more
characters
emotions.
in the previous
Don't you dare come near me,
chapter,
you filthy defect.
but I think
Isabel, now!
we're pretty much going to have the stories
This
continue
him.
down the same path now. I think the story is going to just always be
We won't let
connected,
you or
and-
anyone else
and there
like
won't
you have
be
your way with this world any longer.
a complete reset point.
You won't. That's cute. But there's just one tiny detail you missed. I don't die.
Effectively,
so
though, every 2
easily.
chapters the story does reset.
Wanna take bets on which of us survives? I guarantee you the odds aren't in your favor.
Seems like the tower
Where'd it
itself
come
is
from?
shaking.
I sense it. Originating from another being.
How about it? We'll roll the dice and revel in your destruction.
So is he just like draining
Hope you're ready
Nerva's
for the
power
end, ladies.
from a vessel of Nerva, or has Nerva given her power to him, or does he have like Nerva trapped in this containment cell? It's gonna be weird if they actually do defeat Nerva in this story, because then I guess you swing back to looking for Nexus and maybe you run into a different keeper in the next chapter. Because they kind of can't wrap things up. Like there has to be.
Hated you for so long, you filthy, unknowable creature.
Yeah, there has to be a keeper or something worse than a keeper, keeping them traveling to different worlds and fighting to save worlds. Until all the characters just decide that they're going to be superheroes going to every single universe.
It's her.
Which it'd be hard to convince Urias to just constantly spend the rest of his life fighting keepers or enemies for no reason. Particularly if you realize it's a potential infinite universe with infinite different worlds.
Willful one, your request has been heard.
This is the first we've heard of Nerva in this story, right at the end.
What is she? I'm scared.
I wouldn't be surprised if she just kills him, though. You get a custom CG.
No, she's got him.
Me, myself, all we ever wanted was to create something of our own.
Now, the last time Nerva gave her power or merged with a vessel, though, she erased everything in the world and just purged the whole world. So I don't see why she wouldn't just do the same thing here and destroy everything.
That's what we get to do. Tell me, Nerva.
I don't know why Nerva would change her. I don't know why she would change her method of operating.
Baphomet, what are you doing? You're asking her to take away your humanity.
Don't lump me in with you, mortal. I'm us. We're me. I'm above you, human filth. We're Baphomet Ardalite.
Again, don't need a last name.
Thou art fit to be our vessel. Alas, you are malformed. Your being rejects this honor. However, there may still be a role for you yet.
This is the first time we've seen Nerva. Like, very late in the story. And I think this is being mistranslated. I think it meant to say thou art not fit. Or aren't fit. Then the up and down writing means nothing in the voice acting.
Home shall know fear as it bows to purgation.
She has basically the same Portal Craft animation.
I will imbibe the souls of this world until I wrest new power from the land.
So apparently she's getting new power from this land. Interesting. Interesting point to end the story. And the only thing I guess I can assume is that the Seeds of Conflict story here is oddly a continuation of this story, which is weird, certainly. And it kind of does give the indication that gives Rebellion all the way through Chapter 8 were released in the 3rd year anniversary, and we're now at the 4th year anniversary, and Invasion of the World Reaver is the next big expansion. So ideally we would want to see Invasion of the World Reaver approaching a solid 7 or higher out of 10 in the writing. But also, it's just been such a long journey that it is really, really hard for me to pay attention and be fair in rating a story like this. I feel like that was a pretty disappointing ending, and you're at best getting 6 out of 10 in general for Chapter 6. And then Chapter 7 then is going to go back to the old ways of doing things. So we are going to have a tale of Arissa, Erica, Rowan, and Eris. And I don't know if maybe they end up in a completely different land. That's what I thought was going to happen. But now it kind of feels like they may have just been time delayed and they end up in the same world, which would be weird. Meanwhile, let's see where we are with daily missions. Oops. Apparently I've got some more daily missions I need to do. And we have one that's only 10, so let's replace that. And yeah, still not really making any progress with the temporary gems. And one daily mission gets you almost 1 pack. All 3 daily missions combined get you almost 1 pack, at least as far as the solo player missions go. And I really will just be stuck with that for a while until I get all of these single player stories done. Let's see. We are logging in every day though and getting a pack ticket. So there definitely is a point here where this game is way more generous. I thought it was crazy to think that you needed 400 card pack points to do a tradables, but it really isn't that crazy. Particularly when I think that card pack number never really stops. I think once you get to 400, it's always going to be 400. So even if you don't open 400 packs by the time the most recent expansion is shifted out into the rotation, out of rotation, you still probably will be able to later on go back and get all the cards if you want to get all the cards. So we have Priestess of Foresight. If another allied follower with World is in play, destroy an enemy follower, otherwise gain ward. Okay. We have another Soul Box or Mimic. If an allied amulet awaits, if an allied amulets are in play, evolve the follower. I can see playing that in the deck with a lot of amulets. We have Magical Augmentation, deal 1 damage to enemy follower. If you have Earthright enabled for 2, does that mean you need 2 Earthrights, or does that mean you have to have Earthright and 2 mana play points? I think that means you have to have 2 mana and Earthright. We have the Moonrise Werewolf character. If Avarice is activated for you, gain +0/+2 and ward. Enhance, gain +3/+3 if you spend 5. A lot of these cards are fairly familiar at this point. Accelerate, draw a card. I do feel like I'm fairly on the verge of starting to think about opening some of the older packs and older expansions, but I'm not quite to that. I want to hold off on that, sit on the gold until the next expansion happens, and then once I have 90% of the new expansion, go back and start trying to get the older cards. But it does seem like it's very doable, unlike some of the Hearthstone. Like if you were trying to play Hearthstone brand new account today, there's no way you're going to be able to get all the cards, not without spending hundreds of dollars. And even Magic the Gathering Arena, since it doesn't actually have all of the cards from Magic the Gathering, seems like you might be able to get all the old cards, but you really couldn't. Not without spending hundreds of dollars. We have Stalwart Featherfolk. If any allied amulets are in play, restore X defense to your leaders. X equals the number of allied amulets in play. And then this might be new. I don't think I have this. Vampire of Calamity 7/7/7. Accelerate 1, deal 1 damage to your leader, deal 2 damage to enemy follower. These are nice cards when you can play them early if you're willing to waste them, or you can hold on to them. If you play it for 7, it gets rush, and if Wrath is activated for you, deal 4 damage to an enemy and restore 4 damage to a leader, which dealing 4 damage is quite a lot, frankly. So yeah, I guess what I would want to do is probably after the next expansion see how many of the classic card packs are worth buying. There definitely are some expansions here where I haven't even bought a single pack. They didn't give you any tickets for anything other than classic cards and what is currently in rotation. So you might want to buy things that are in Steel Rebellion. I should look at the cards in Rebirth Glory, and this might be a slight teaser as to what is going to happen in the next expansion, but let's see. It could very well be that this expansion does not have anything to do with any of the main story, and these are just characters that are made up out of nowhere, which would be fine, certainly. But it could also very well be that we're going to start seeing more of the 11 characters and more of the fantasy characters. In a weird way, the main story has taken a twist towards the robotic away from the fantasy, and it's going to have to at some point shift to something different. I don't know if that thing different is back to fantasy or if they're going to try and have more vampires and demons. I think it would be an interesting story to tell if it was a demon world, but it would be a difficult story if you're going to try and be family friendly. But it would be interesting, certainly. Are we seeing anything with names? Yeah, there are some named characters, which does kind of imply something. Well, we definitely aren't seeing a lot of robots, though. So it does seem like they've decided to shift out of that direction. Which makes sense. It probably is fairly boring to go that route. Let's look at fortune in this case. So as we are at the current moment, we have a decent amount of fortune cards, but I think it is time to liquefy some things, because we are kind of at that point where it seems like it's just expanding the list here in kind of a crazy way. Although maybe that doesn't really make sense on the second hand. Like, we still definitely have some cards to get. Because what occurred to me is something like this. Is it possible that times 10 is kind of a maximum that you can get, and after you get 10 copies of something, you're guaranteed not to get any more copies? Or does this go up to potentially times 99 or 100 or 1,000, or does this number just continue to go and go and go? Does it change the odds of drawing something at all? Because certainly I could liquefy the extras here, and that it would now get me up to 8,430, which seems like a large amount, but it really isn't. And let's see, if you were going to like craft cards. Like, how do you even... Like, how would you even know what cards you would want to craft? That's the thing that would drive you crazy, is you would look for legendary cards, you'd look for the most recent expansion cards, you'd click on something like this, 3,500 vials. Not a lot. And unless you had a list of cards in front of you telling you what to get, and trying to play like a meta deck, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Then where are we with the temporary cards? No cards found? How could that be? Any in general temporary cards? Yeah. There's a lot of temporary cards that we have, but I don't know why you would specifically make temporary cards into real cards unless you just have nothing better to do. I must have been given all these temporary cards. That's the only thing that makes any sense at all. It's like 15 pages of temporary cards with only one copy, which then I guess if I was going to go over here, how do you buy temporary decks? I've seen them. Buy cards, trade temporary cards. Yeah, well, you really don't have enough for all of these, and it seems like the number of cards you can get are fairly low. Doesn't seem crazy low though. Again, you would basically need a pre-built deck, a meta deck, to do this. And you could definitely make a mistake and make multiple copies of some of these cards. These all seem like fortune temporary cards though. These don't seem like you can trade any temporary cards from previous expansions. So is that the case? No, there's tradables listed here. And apparently I already have several of these. Interesting. But now that I actually understand how temporary works, the idea of buying temporary decks does have an appeal to them, but then they don't sell the temporary decks anymore. It took me too much time to figure out how that would work, and so now you're down to this point where $5 for pre-built decks this way very well might be cheaper. Well, it's a one-time cost. It might be cheaper to spend, well, I guess $40 to get all of these pre-built decks and potentially have a close to full completion for classic card packs and Darkness Evolved, one would hope. Of course, as you get up to expansions that are still in play, the price goes up by more than double. So, yeah. I think... Let's see. I think set 3 cards might still be playable, but maybe not. But yeah, a lot of these pre-built decks would be very expensive. But it would be guaranteed cards. Well, anyways, I'm kind of just wasting time at this point. And yeah, there's an odd parallel to me being boring and going through all these different shops and wasting time, and the game and the main story being boring and wasting everybody's time. But I'll vow now to stop doing that, so that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam, or you can gift me a game off my wish list, or gift me a gift card. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.